All right. Good afternoon. It is now 1:30, depending upon which clock you use. Mine says 1:31, and that wall says 1:29, so we'll split it. It is now 1:30, and this special open meeting of the Board of Directors of the Third Laguna Hills Mutual is called to order. The purpose of this meeting is to review the 2026 Third Mutual Business Plan, which is version 3 of the proposed budget for Third Mutual for 2026. Before we do that, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any opposition? Any changes? Okay, then the agenda stands approved as presented, at which point we move on to chair remarks. And I just want to welcome all of you, whether here or at home, and those watching elsewhere, as this is one of the most important meetings of the year. As directors, we have a duty to establish assessments, that'll provide, 1, sufficient operating funds to maintain the mutual for the coming year, but we're also obligated to provide funds in reserve for the unexpected that might occur in the near future or a little further, and we take that obligation very seriously. Before we proceed, I'd like to point out 2 things. First, we will not be voting on this proposed budget today. That will happen at the September board meeting, Tuesday, September 16th. Today, we will only be discussing the third mutual portion of the 2026 monthly assessment, which at the moment, before discussion, is suggesting a 5% increase. What we will not be doing is addressing the GRF portion of the per man or per month assessment, as that is determined by the GRF board. And with that, it's time for open forum. Do we have any speakers?
Not at this moment.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And with that, let's move right on to review of the 2026 Third Business Plan, version 3. And Steve, will that be you?
That will be me. Thank you very
Director
much.
of Finance, Steve Forman.
Absolutely. And let me begin, before we get into the actual presentation, to explain what was distributed from the overall packet. So in addition to the presentation that we're going to be discussing today, you got a copy of an executive summary, which was page 1 of 25 of the handout. And that effectively just discussed the differences between your iterations. So the version 2 that was handed out compared to the version 3 that we're going to be discussing today. You also received another handout, a staff report dated today, and it gives you overall the differences between, that is on page 3 of 25. And that gives you overall a difference between what is being proposed here as version 3 compared to your 2025 existing assessments. And then moving on, we're going to look at page 6. And that is, it's really small on screen, but that shows you the business plan as it stands right now. So this is the schedule that you're going to be used to seeing when we're discussing the Green Book all throughout 2026. And off to the right-hand side, it gives you in the salmon color the differences between version 3 and version 2. Moving on to page 8. Page 8 is going to be a detailed comparison looking at 22 actuals through 24 actuals. And then it's got across the top 25 budgetary information, so your current budget, versus as it's proposed right now for the 2026 business plan. And lastly, I'm going to take your eyes to page 13 of 2025. And this is your programs reports. And again, it's showing you similarly the 22 through 2024 actuals, the 2025 budget in the green column, as well as the 2026. So in today's meeting, we're not going to be going over these in detail. So I'll share kind of some high-level concepts here shortly, but I want to make certain you understood what was in your packet. If you need to go back and reference it, either today after the presentation is done or on a go-forward basis.
And as you're presenting, if we can pause at times for questions from the board, that would be great, or from our members.
Yep. However you'd like to proceed, happy to do so. So we'll go ahead and kick off with slide number 2 in your packets. That is on page 15 of 25. So, and as that comes up on screen, what you'll see before you in just a moment is a budgetary calendar. And that calendar is arriving here shortly. But it's the same calendar that you've seen since the early iterations of this process. And thank you. So there you go. Off to the far right-hand side, you're seeing Third's calendar. So in the beginning, we went ahead and we discussed the maintenance and construction as well as landscape committees to discuss service levels. And in finance, we covered most everything else. And that was back in January. And then on slide 3 here, you're going to see the first time we presented the version 1 budget was in mid-May. We discussed your M&C. So again, earlier version, earlier presentations, we discussed service levels, existing work that's being completed in 2025. And this here on May 19th was the first time you actually got to see some numbers presented before you for version 1. And then on June 2nd, you discussed landscape. And then overall, we had a discussion on June 9th. The difference that we had between previous year in 2024 versus 2025 is for that version 2, we went ahead and handed out a copy of the business plan to all the board members. We made it available online. But unlike previous years, we did not hold a board meeting. Instead, we took all that information from everyone, from the board members specifically, and any change that you wanted to see, we received it back from you, and it is now being presented here for the first time as version 3. So that brings us to today. And on slide 4, and again, pause at any time for questions. So the biggest change that we made for version 3, and it was a big one, we had discussed with our risk manager, so he was working on making some changes for your property insurance. So he had some preliminary figures that he included in our version 2 budget, and that included back then about between version 1 and version 2, we made about a $300,000 reduction to property insurance. But after we received some finalized numbers from our insurance broker in early to mid-July, that came back as an additional $1.3 million reduction in your property insurance. So overall, year over year, your reduction, you can see here in 2025, we budgeted $7.3 million. And in version 3, we're proposing a $5,747,000 reduction. So effectively a $21 decrease from your previous year. And in order to maintain that 5% that we've been speaking about all year, well, since early January in terms of the increase. So in order to maintain that 5%, we went ahead and moved that down to the disaster fund contribution. So effectively, no difference in your overall assessment. And the reason why we have included in the disaster fund contribution is there is a law where we are working towards hardening your fire prevention, specific to landscape. So there is a multi-million-dollar investment that's going to be made in the next few years. So rather than pulling that money from future assessments, taking the insurance savings that we're seeing here and placing it into the disaster fund will get you partially along the way in order to fund that large expenditure coming up. Off the top, again, I mentioned the 5%, but you're looking at that third basic assessment per man or per month line item. In 2025, you're currently paying $616.98, and that dollar amount does not include certain surcharges if you are in a building that has elevator charges or some other smaller charges. Then again, once we see in version 2, we are at $647.67, and effectively it stayed the same into version 3 at $647.65 for a total year-over-year increase at $30.67. Okay, on our next slide. So I kind of covered this when I discussed the calendar, but overall, the budgetary process included starting back in January and starting with your committees, making certain that everyone was aware of what was going on and taking your feedback before we brought forward a version 1. Each department, similar to previous years, came up with what it's going to cost based upon inflation, other factors in the market. We brought it before the CEO as well as finance. We all worked together to aggregate that information and create a preliminary version. After Siobhan went through and we met with the department heads, made some cuts here and there, and then after those cuts were made, and the department heads more or less sharpened their pencils, we re-aggregated that information and presented the version 1 that was presented back in the May timeframe. Here we show you today with the new numbers that have been added in. The number I mentioned before was $647.65. That is the 5% increase over the 2025 budget, and you can see the change that has taken place from 22 to 2026. So I want to say the increases that we had shared with you in your previous years was averaging around a 4% increase. So last year in 2025, the increase over 24 was a 5%. So this is year 2 of a 5% increase. And one of the benefits of maintaining this level increase is your future assessments should be somewhat stabilized in terms of, say, in 27, 28, hopefully if we're able to maintain this level of an increase, the benefit will be derived from your members is they'll be able to anticipate what those increases will be. And again, 2 years in a row of 5% is commendable. On slide 7, this is, although we said that we were going to talk about GRF, I wanted to make certain everyone is aware of the fact that year over year, you're looking at another increase to the tune of, I want to say, 8 or 9%, but the overall dollar amount that you're going to be charged in your assessment for your total basic assessment is $909.56. So similar to the previous slide, you're seeing an increase over time. Okay, before I go into details, do you want me to pause or just keep going?
I just might want to comment momentarily.
Please.
You referred very briefly to the fire hardening down of the area. Third Mutual is in a high, portions, I should say, of Third Mutual are in a high fire risk area. And very recently, we were informed that there would be some significant things that we might have to do. And significant is still not been defined. But whenever there are significant changes, that usually means significant funds. And so that decision to move the money explains the decision to move the money that was saved on the insurance that we had anticipated spending over to the reserve area did we put it in disaster? We have a lot of flexibility in terms of where we put those things because they aren't part of the operating budget. But I just wanted people to know that that is something, we get hit with these things fairly regularly and try and roll with it. But that is the reason for that. And that was a sum that was very nice to be able to move over without having to add to any concerns for next year. Do we have any questions at this point? Raise that.
Is it, can we look at the department also, or that is not?
The what, I'm sorry?
Can we look at the department budget, one department, for example, or that's not here?
Possibly, depends upon, sure,
Okay,
ask the question,
can
I'll see
we
what I
look
can
at the
do.
maintenance and construction budget?
Okay.
I just want to see, because 2025, we did some epoxy lining and we spent all the money. And according to the department, we don't have any money left.
Okay.
We decided not to do epoxy lining, but instead, just indiscriminately, not just not to do it. We're going to do inspection and the cleanup and see if the line need to be changed, replaced, or epoxy lining is warranted. I want to see how much money we allocating, because I'm not sure that how much money is 2026 we put in there and what we can do with it, because now we have to set up a schedule for the buildings that need to be investigated.
Correct.
Because people, there was a schedule for epoxy lining. That the schedule to my knowledge, we should keep the same schedule, but rather than do epoxy lining, we do the inspection and see if needed anything, we do. If not, move on. So can you help me with that?
Okay,
How much
and
money
then-
we put 2026?
And then after that, Jim has a question, and then Robert, can Steve answer that first, or do you need to?
Yeah, I had some comments on him too, but anyway, it's just to understand, not comments, but just to understand what.
Okay,
the-
let's see if how much money we're putting
The-
in there for 2026.
So I can just say, one of the reasons I wanted to raise my hand there is, are we confusing, is epoxy lining, is that a reserve expenditure or an operating?
Operating.
It is an
No,
operating,
no, 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 no. The epoxy lining is a reserve expenditure.
yeah.
But we allocated
So-
into the operation. That we spend that money out of
Yeah.
the,
You,
when we
we-
allocate and we spend, that become part of the operation.
Still,
It still goes
it's
directly.
still reserved.
It's still reserve.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how much we put in for
That's-
reserve, out of reserve for that?
But that's the clarity that I wanted, because we're dealing with the operating right now, details.
do you have your microphone on?
Yeah. We're dealing with the details of the operating for right now. So when we get to the reserve, we can talk about that. But right now, it only has the reserve impact per man or per month. And the only thing that changed in the reserve in terms of our allocation or per man or per month has been as a result of the putting money into the disaster recovery or whatever it was.
So, yeah, just to clarify.
Yeah.
So with regards to the presentation today, I'm really focused on the differences between the version 2 and version 3, but I'm
I
happy to
get that.
discuss anything for that matter. But as we stand right now, yes, the epoxy lining is a reserve expenditure. In the earlier version, version 1, we ultimately had budgeted $2.5 million.
Yeah.
And then we took that down based upon the direction of the board, down to $1 million. And the intent of that was, rather than following a consistent schedule, the board was going to be directing staff to look at various buildings that are experiencing higher levels of leaks and targeting those with different actions, as opposed to, meaning you're going to follow the leaks to make the fixes, as opposed to putting them in a row and making those repairs based on a different schedule.
Well, just to clarify my point is that I think sometimes we have a tendency to confuse the expenditures for reserve with the operating expenses, which are two different buckets that the money is being pulled from. It's not that it's not important, but maintenance, M&C actually have an involvement in both as a department. And so when they allocate money to operating and to the reserves, they're dealing with that as their own internal allocation to fund what we say we would need or want, as well as the need and want within the reserves. And I don't know if we don't want to mix the two, but we definitely want to discuss the two, but I don't think I think.
Yeah, and it might make it clearer for us.
Yeah.
If we discuss the actual schedule from the operating fund of what's expected to do as part of, and that's I
That's
think
what I
what
was
Jim is
asking.
saying.
Exactly.
is-
Just
is
the
what's
operating and then
expected
get
as
to the
part of the
reserve, yes.
day-to-day operation
Yeah.
and the operating fund, and then when we get to it,
The reserve, how much out of reserve?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And that's
Right now, I want to see how much on the operation side.
Right. Regarding the question Reza raised, waistline remediation, last year, 2025 was 500,000. This year budget is at $1.5 million.
okay, and again, that's, as Jim has pointed out, that's reserve money. and
Yeah,
so
that's
we
reserve
will-
fund, yeah.
We will delay that discussion to that point.
Oh.
And thank you for clarifying it, because it's also important that our members understand the difference and know what we're looking
Okay.
at.
Is there anything on the operation side that we allocate or we budgeting for waistline? Anything? Not on the reserve?
No. Anything from an infrastructure perspective, like for waistline remediation, we're making those improvements. Those are all reserve expenditures.
Okay, because now, epoxy lining, I understand, but the cleanup and investigation that's still out of reserve?
Yes.
It's all going to be through reserve?
So we had a
I
change.
just want to make sure, that, is there anything on the operation side?
Yeah, let me go ahead.
Yeah, I
and
think-
while
I
Steve
think
is
we're gonna
looking
have
for Manuel's
Manuel
here.
come up.
Boss
And
is
then,
there.
Robert, do you still have a question that's related to this, or should we finish this discussion first and then move on to you? Robert? Yeah. Yeah. No, you were intently
I was reading.
preparing, so. that's
go
very
ahead.
good.
Skip me at this
Okay,
point.
Manuel, thank you.
Good afternoon, Manuel Gomez, Director of Maintenance and Construction. All of the epoxy lining program funds are in the reserve. The funding you see for plumbing and operating is to respond to stoppages and to repair the immediate concern, but it's not the replacement of anything.
Or the relining or anything.
Or the
related
relining, right.
to
So
that.
replacement, relining, it's in reserves, responding to clearing the line, any other maintenance item is under operating.
So when we do the schedule, cleaning of the waistlines, those are all out of reserve.
Correct.
So on the emergency, you have money in operation.
Emergency and maintenance, yes. And
Well,
operation.
explain to me what the maintenance is, because to me, cleanup is a maintenance, but explain to me what the department means by maintenance.
Well, you and I talked about this earlier today.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone
Yeah.
knows.
The epoxy lining program, when a building is identified to receive epoxy lining, we go in first and do an inspection of the pipe to assess the condition of it before we do the lining. We've had discussions with the MNC committee about instead of doing lining, just doing a cleaning of the pipe. Staff has indicated to the committee that we don't recommend doing that. It wears down the lining of the pipe, it deteriorates the thickness, and potentially exposes us to further damage. So we've suggested and recommended against that. The committee has not yet given us direction to go in that, to do that process, but I understand Director Karimi is interested in having that discussion and has asked us to agendize it for your September MNC committee meeting to discuss it again. We talked about it 2 months ago. Unfortunately, Director Karimi was not at that meeting, but happy to bring it back again. Doesn't have to impact anything you're doing in the budget today. You can still do whatever budget allocation the board deems appropriate, and we could always come back later and modify the budget through either a supplemental or a reduction or something like that later on.
And just to clarify for those both in our audience here and at home, the work of committees is done at the committee meetings and brought to us. This is obviously something that's an ongoing issue that we tend to face, and the committee will have to be looking at it. And I want to thank Mr. Gomez, who is responsible for maintenance and construction area, for being here so that he can clarify these things for us. You might want to sit in the front row instead of the back. We might need you sooner than expected. Okay, and with that, Robert, did you have? You're okay.
Question over here.
Okay, Director Moon.
Thank you. I've been on this business meeting for, this is my third year. I'm still confused. First year, I couldn't figure it out. I'm trying to figure it out. Second year, I was same. I asked many questions. Very little answer I got. Third year, it's the third version right now. I'm still very confused. Let me say it simple way, okay? If I'm managing my own household or my business, I want to plan it. What is my operating expense that year? Okay, this is yearly budget, so that year.
And when you
That
speak
is
of operating, you're saying expected.
Yeah,
Because that's
expected,
a
okay,
differentiation.
let's say I'm gonna replace my car or whatever, I'm gonna budget that's operational budget, right? Or I wanna hire the hand, higher hand, and I'm going to. So that's the operational budget. And then, in any case, I want to have something reserved, like 20%, some 30% in case of some price going up or something which I didn't expect and I need some reserve, okay? Then some disaster happened, okay? I had accident or my wife, I don't have a wife, but my wife had accident. Then I need some disaster fund coming in. So there's a three fund I need.
Right.
One is reserve, one is disaster. Problem in this budget, I've been trying to figure out. They usually reserve all over this, yes. And then the disaster also is inappropriate. When you look at here, the replacement reserve fund and then here, it has two things on the restricted fund contribution. It said one is a disaster fund, one is unappropriated fund. So, this is for the resident, not only me, but for the resident. How can they figure out the disaster fund, and then we have a study, and then disaster fund 30%, 40%, we have the disaster fund or reserve fund, all that, we have to pump in. And then we don't know how that money gonna be used. On top of that, we are very complicated. We are controlling the mutual budget only. And then we have a GRF budget, which we cannot control or we cannot say much. And then this year, like a third version here, our third mutual is a 5% increase so far in third version, what I see. GRF is a 10%
We
increase.
can't, again,
Just let him finish it.
Let me finish it, okay? We don't know how we can control, we don't have any real hand on the GRF budget. But as a resident, I'm one of the residents, all of us are one of the residents. The money have to come our pocket, right? And I'm kind of mad. Okay, Reza just say epoxy or that, we're trying to do a lot of a compromise not to increase. Okay, let's say epoxy, if we do every building, it's gonna cost $5 million, and we're trying to save a few dollars, and we are now pick and choose, we started that. And then also pavement, we compromised. We trying to cut the service, trying to cut the, on top of that, we had, this year, we had a really great fortune to bring it down the insurance premium. But still, we have to pay more. I don't know why. So at least I like to urge, or this committee, or the mutual, have some way we can tell GRF, look, we cannot go over what we're trying to do. I don't know what they are doing. You know, they must be doing a great job. Okay? But still, money have to come from every resident pocket. You just, you know, I haven't been physician and I made a pretty decent money, but we still need the budget. You cannot have unlimited budget, 10%, 20%, whatever. We want to put this, we want to put that, we want to put that. There's a, look at, more than 50% of our residents are on Social Security income. I heard a lot of residents cannot keep up with it. They have to sell their unit. Either they lease it back or they have to move out. Is that what you're trying to do? So, first thing I like to do, we cannot we want to make at least resolution, some kind of resolution urging the GRF reconsider that 10%. We don't have a bite on it, but at least we can ask them to do that. Second one is we want to make a reserve disaster all this fund, control it. I like to have more money in my bank account if I'm my own household, but not the expense of that. And so when we put more money in reserve, let's say we made $1 million from the insurance decrease, it goes to disaster fund. What kind of disaster we are expecting? So we have to be careful where we put the money in. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you. And I just want to, you did a great job of identifying those things that we expect to spend money, as you talked about our own personal budgets, those things we expect to spend money on, those things that tend to deteriorate and might need correction and improvement, and that would be what we set money aside for the rainy day. And then there's the potential disaster, and those things are clearly defined. The disaster fund can be used only for certain kinds of things. So before anybody comments, I just want to make sure that we as a board and that those of our members understand that it's not just money that we take from somewhere. Reserve money is identified as used for certain kinds of things. Disasters are for certain kinds of things, and that unclassified is the contingency fund. It's for what might happen if it starts to rain and we weren't ready for it. That's the rainy day fund. That's the things we can't anticipate, but something will probably happen. And so I just wanted to do that because I don't want to leave our committee or our members with the impression that we just take money from anywhere, because that isn't how it happens. It's very clearly identified. So with that, Robert.
Director Moon, I agree with most of what you just said. However, your last comment about the money we save from insurance and it going into the disaster fund, all right? We saved about $1.2 million, but we need approximately $3 million to start doing the work related to the CAL FIRE requirements and in terms of Zone 0 and those kinds of things. So that's why that insurance savings has been moved directly down there and not into the pockets of our members, because otherwise we'd have to raise it anyhow to cover those costs.
Yeah, okay. That's the state requirement. The state sent us the requirement which we didn't expect. But it, fortunately, unfortunately, it comes before we make a budget. So it should be, to my mind, it should not be unexpected. Now it's expected event. So it should be operational budget. It should not be disaster, because it wasn't disaster.
So if I may, so
Yes.
you brought up some valid points, and I'll address each of them. So just at a high level, and I'll go through each of them, you mentioned the operational budget. And what we've done in previous years is this version 3 is being televised. What we typically have done in the past is we've taken about 3.5 hours to go through and repeat back to the board every detail of the budget that's being presented before you. This year, we made a slight change to where, given technology, all the meetings that have been leading up to this have been available via Zoom, available via, if you wanted to attend live. So rather than going through and repeating all the same process, we're just going over the changes from version 2 to version 3. But let me back up just for a moment, and I will show you on screen the operational budget. So again, the programs report, and if you're able to enlarge this a little bit so make it a little more visible. So you have, there you go, your 3 different areas where you spend a good portion of your operating budget, the M&C, general services, as well as landscape. And once again, back in between January through May, you were meeting with the various committees to ultimately provide direction to the committees. So within each of these, for instance, plumbing services is labeled number 1, carpentry services labeled number 2. There's a lot of program level detail below this that we had shared at some of the previous meetings that the board had an opportunity to opine on. So what we're presenting to you before is a very high level. This is just year-over-year changes. So, but we've been taking input from the board, from the committees, from anybody who wanted to share. We've been taking that input into consideration and presenting you a viable budget. So to your point, from an operational perspective, these are your numbers. These are where you're spending your money for the upcoming year, and you can compare versus what you spent in 2025, what you budgeted in 2025 versus what we're anticipating budgeting in 2026. And then off to the right-hand side, you can see of that 2026 budgetary number, how much is being spent on in-house labor versus materials versus outside services. Your next comment was reserves. That's on the next schedule down, the next page. Oops. Okay. And similarly, the first line item there is building structures, number 22. Likewise, in the previous iterations of this, there was a schedule that we presented with a bunch of detail in blue. This is just the aggregated dollar amount, but we can break that down and supply it after this meeting. But once again, it hasn't changed since the version that we sent out a few weeks ago where the detail was explained. But these are the programs that you're budgeting for, so you have a clear indication of where the money is going to be spent. The differences between your operating expenditures versus your replacements, your reserve expenditures. Your operationals is your day-to-day maintenance. These are the labor hours that you're going to maintain the community, as opposed to your reserves. And forgive me for just reading, but on an annual basis, everyone receives their business plan, right? It's contained in the Green Book. Each year, we provide the definitions for each of the funds. The replacement specifically for the reserve, forgive me once again for reading, but this fund was established at the original construction of the mutual. The purpose of the reserve, and this is the key piece, the purpose of the reserve fund is to provide for the repair, restoration, replacement, or maintenance of structure, elements, mechanical equipment within the mutual, including but not limited to building structures, plumbing, roofs, paving, and walls. For instance, the items that you see here before you listed under the reserve expenditures. So those are the ongoing structural items that, again, Manuel spoke to a moment ago with regards to the epoxy. That's just one example of it. The upcoming project that we're going to be having that we are proposing to put money towards the disaster, that's also defined in this same book. For instance, on the 2025 Green Book, it's listed on page 44. The disaster fund reads, this fund is used for the repair and replacement of mutual assets damaged or uninsured by unexpected disasters, in addition to providing for certain insurance premiums as directed by the board. This fund may also be used for write-offs for uncollectible accounts according to the original definition of the operating fund. And this fund is not required by Civil Code. But we have a known item that's coming down the pipe for the Cal OSHA requirement. So the dollar amount
Cal
is...
Fire, so that people understand.
Correct. So the dollar amount is not fully determined, but we know the moment, it was mentioned a moment ago, that it's probably around $3 million. You could either approve it as is, which staff's recommending by including about $1.5 million to fund that for the upcoming expenditure, or ultimately you would cause a significant increase to your members next year. So rather than having a shock in 2027, you're smoothing the increase in and avoiding the sharp increase that potentially, because while it's not known to the specific dollar amount what it's going to cost, we are aware of this coming down the pipe and we're planning ahead. So to your point, how you run your household is the same way we run the business here. We see an expense coming down the line and we want to make certain that we have adequate funding in place for when those services actually need to be performed. Lastly, with regards to GRF, at any time, no different than what we're doing here for third, GRF has also had their meetings that started back in January. We've been taking input. We've had there's been numerous committee meetings, there's been numerous board meetings discussing the reasons why they're experiencing a 10% increase. In their version 1, they were presenting a 13.5% increase. It was based upon the direction of the boards. That increase had been reduced down to 10. It's still a significant increase, and GRF is well aware of that, and they wish they could do more, but they're experiencing, like Third, factors in the market that are causing sharp increases. Theirs are different. They're seeing a decline in some of the revenues. Again, I don't want to go too in depth in terms of GRF because that's not the place for this conversation, but some of their advertising revenue is just diminishing. And again, we share the details of that in that meeting. So they don't have the outside revenue that's able to offset the expenses that they have seen in the past. So they, like Third, they're doing everything they can to manage their operating budgets in order to kind of keep things under control. But like United experienced in 2025, like Third experienced in previous years, they're seeing an uptick expenses in 2026 at 10%. So, but when you take in combination the 5% from Third, 10% from GRF, you're looking at a 6.4% increase. And through the hard work of the boards, it's limited to 6.4, right? Because you're seeing some expenditures that are increasing abnormally out there, like utilities, like insurance, in not so much property insurance, but GRF has experienced automobile insurance increases. So all those factors, I think the boards have done a good job limiting that increase to 6.6%, excuse me, 6.4% increase.
Yes.
I have a question, Steve.
Please.
Right now on the screen, it is both reserve and operating fund labors all included. Am I correct?
Somewhat. On the previous page was all operating. This page here, the first two categories, you see reserve from M&C, you see reserve for landscaping,
Yeah.
and then
So my
down
question
below
is
is
not that.
disaster and.
My
pardon.
question is 47,236 hours plus 200 hours plus 361 hours are all M&C total budgeted hours. Am I correct? Plus reserve, related some reserve operating hours. Am I correct? If we add all three and plus some odd hours for MNC, that's entire hours that we're talking about, right?
Let me just rephrase that, just because you're using operating and reserve interchangeably. In this schedule here, everyone, he's looking off to the right-hand side where it says total. So 47,000 hours is specific to the reserve hours that the MNC team is going to be using
Reserve hours?
for reserve hours. If you go back one page, Karina. Okay, here's your operating hours. So MNC in 2026 is proposing to use approximately 24,000 hours for the operating fund expenditures.
What, 19,204 hours is also MNC hours, am I correct?
No. As it says
thought
with the header,
janitor-
that's for general services. So general services is anticipating using for janitorial services.
Janitorial still under the
Under general
GS?
services.
I
correct.
thought it was, I switched to
Sure.
MNC, I thought.
Nope.
Okay, no, okay. So then 23,846 hours plus 47,797 is a total MNC labor hours
Budgeted.
budgeted.
Correct.
Is it direct labor hours? It is also include all the non-union operating hours as well?
That's all hours, correct.
Direct hours, direct
So.
labor hours?
Yeah, so 64% of your, excuse me, no. Give me just one moment.
Yeah, about 70,000 hours, yes.
So about 54% of your hours are spent in, for union, and 46 is for non-union.
So all included in here?
Correct. So for these programs specifically, I'm not saying, like, for instance, so my hours are not included because I'm not in M&C or general
Yes, I
services,
understand.
right?
M&C
But
department
for those
hours.
programs specifically, these are the budgeted hours for these, for the operating fund. the reserve fund, as well as on the secondary page, we also have, I believe, the disaster as well as the garden villa. So those are all the hours that are included.
So my calculation is, the top of my head is, if we add all those hours together, divide by total employee number, that will give us some efficiency. Am I correct?
Some efficiencies, it give you an expectation of what the average
Expected-
salary would be,
yeah,
sure.
dollars spent for the hourly wages for total combined
Correct.
for the MSD department, right?
Correct.
Can we get that number?
I mean, I can take, the answer is yes. I can quickly take, not quickly, after this meeting, I can go back and pull the numbers together. I can take the totals divided by the hours and come up with the salary.
Right, and then also, I like to see direct labor hours for the projects or operating fund as
Correct.
well.
So-
You already separate out indirect labor and direct labors.
So, yes.
Am I correct?
Correct, and yes,
Okay.
and again, all that information has been presented to you in the previous presentations. Just so you're aware, if you were to go back into the previous presentation, for instance, I'm going to pick this out and say on this line number 1 where it says plumbing service,
Yes.
in the previous presentation, underneath it had a bunch of blue detail, right? And that was individual, it had plumbing services, outside services, and it gave you a certain dollar amount. And then it had direct labor, so you can take that direct labor divided by the hours and get an average salary.
Okay,
So, but we
can
can,
we have that numbers?
absolutely, it hasn't
Okay.
changed since the last presentation, so I'll forward that over to you.
Okay,
Or-
another question.
Or like specifically, maybe we'll talk after the meeting, because I could do that for every single one, or I can target.
I just want us to see MNC department.
Sure.
Okay. Line item 5 and line item 14. There's some differences between expenses related to compensation, $447,000, versus outside the service decreased by $389,000. According to these numbers, it's just a small amount. Why is it not? It doesn't come out as equal numbers.
I apologize. You're going to need to slow down. Can you point me once again to what
Line
page?
5 versus line 14. The page 4 and page 5.
Ah, got it. Okay, expenses related to compensation. If you can pull up the, do you have this? Gotcha. All right, so our screen froze for just a moment, so we'll go ahead and just do this verbally. So line 5, for those that you are listening or watching, so expenses related to compensation increased by $447,682 year over year. So that dollar amount ties to, if you were, President Park, if you were to turn to page 6, that ties to the difference on line 5. In 2026, we're budgeting, we're proposing $3,958,000 versus in the current year, it's $3,510,000. So now that I'm on the same page as you in terms of the numbers, what was the question that you were questioning?
And then line item 14, decrease outside the service. You're saying outside the service we cut down because we hired head account of 9.0 FTE. So you increased $404,540. And then you decrease amount is $389,803. So it's a small amount. That's what I'm saying. Why it does not come out pretty close
Grounds
to
maintenance
each other?
is at the 6.
Or am I comparing apples or
I
oranges?
believe you're comparing apples and oranges. You're comparing basically benefits and workers' compensation to outside services.
Okay.
So apples and oranges. So outside services has gone down as, again, for anybody who has the report in front of them online, page 5 of 25, outside services decreased by $390,000, primarily due to the transition of grounds maintenance from outside services to in-house labor. So that is more appropriate to compare to the previous page. There you go. Here is the new head count for the increase in grounds maintenance, the 404 number that you see there.
Yes.
Correct. So those are more in line.
Those are the 6 cycles versus.
We went
4
to
cycles.
6 cycles instead of 4.
Correct.
We
Yeah.
saved money on outside services, which does cost more. We went to 6 cycles because of the frequent complaints.
I understand.
So-
I understand.
so-
Donna, I understand that. However, 9 FTE increase head count,
Yep.
the last year budget was about $85,000 per head FTE increase, as I recall. 9 FTE increase is way shorter than $85,000 per head. And then outside the service decreased by 389,000. How many people, equivalent to how many people we decrease on outside the service? That's my question.
So again, my understanding is you already have the 6 cycles effectively taking place in 2025.
Yes.
Correct. So now what we're doing in 2026 is we're taking that out of outside services and we're bringing it in-house.
But that doesn't answer me
2026.
the question about 9 FTE increase based on your budget last year, $85,000 per head. 9 FTE should be almost $800,000 increase. But you got only $447,000
So
just for
it's just
compensation.
compensation only. It does not include benefits and the like. So my intent on that slide right there, where you see the 2025 employee compensation of 8.3 million, and it goes in 2026.
I think we need a
Tonight.
little bit more detailed information as to why this is different.
Okay.
Okay? And another question I have here is, when you come up with the version 2, where was it? Version 2 and version 3 comparison. Where is it?
The presentation slide number 4.
Yeah, page 16 out of 25. At version 2, you budgeted property insurance at 6.999, and then disaster fund 844,000, same as year 2025. And version 3, all of a sudden, you increased to 2,096,000. Director Moon pointed that out. And then version 3 of property insurance of 5.7. At version 2, we did not know that we need almost $1.3 million requirement. We did not know that.
Oh, we didn't.
At the version 2.
So we knew we needed money. We knew that it was about $3 million for that would probably come from the disaster fund. But at that moment, we did not have that funding.
Is this the 1.2 million that we
That's correct.
took
Yeah.
from our savings in the insurance?
But we did not figure in version 2, and then we figured in version 3. That's what I'm
Correct.
surprised.
Yeah, so based on conversations with our risk manager, and he's given you presentations in the past, as of version 2's deadline, the best information that we had available from the insurance broker was going to be a savings of about $300,000. I think it's almost exactly $300,000. And maybe the second week of June, which is, again, after we've already finalized the numbers for version 2, he received the finalized numbers from your broker, and based upon additional conversations that had taken place from there.
I understand that.
Okay.
I understand. But
But if I can finish,
yeah.
so after that, and then we repeated this, but after that funding became available, that additional 1.2, rather than decreasing the assessment, the year-over-year assessment, and having to charge potentially an 8% increase in 2027, we've taken that money and we've proposing to move it down into the disaster fund to offset the additional costs that are heading your way.
Because it is an expense we will have to have.
Correct.
Whether we budget it or not. The bill is going to come. And so I think it's important that we keep it in mind.
Okay.
I think we all want to see everything go down. That would be lovely, but it isn't what's been happening. And our facilities are getting older, and we live in a community.
Okay, so
that
another
has
question I have is item number
quite a few
25, 26.
facilities.
Item number 26. In 2025, we had a 0. And then we have 2026, $311,202. Why we increase on appropriate expenditure fund?
Because you're underfunded in 2025.
Yeah.
You're underfunded. By going to 0 in 2025, you force us to have to do what we're doing today.
So I'll get to that in just a moment. So that is on, don't turn to this, but it's on slide 17. So right now, we left off on slide about 8. So slide 17 is when I'm going to be discussing unappropriated. So we'll hold those comments to then, if that's okay. So, so if I may, we'll go ahead and pick up where we left off.
I think Raisa had one comment, I think, before we move on, so we can close.
I just want to ask this question to understand the budgeting process itself. On the operation side, when on the Green Book, we say there are routine maintenance. For example, I use one like paving the streets. We budget it every, 3 years or every 1 year. We do.
You said paving the streets?
Yeah, or resurfacing the,
That's reserved,
the
yes.
streets,
Okay.
whatever we call it. And that is in the Green Book, and is every year we put so much money in there, and that goes to the operation and said this is the money that we're going to spend on resurfacing the street. Is it part of our budget? Let me finish.
No, because you made you said it goes to the operations. Reserve never goes to operations. And I,
Yeah. No.
No, reserve.
I corrected it like when you said it, but from a terminology perspective, just
Yeah.
it's challenging when because we have an operating fund and we have a reserve fund. But when you say operations, people might misunderstand
Okay,
and think
let's-
that's operating
okay.
when it's actually reserved.
We allocate in reserve fund.
Yes.
Thank you for correction. We allocate in reserve fund so much money, and that money, which we allocated, is automatically, we have contract and we're going to spend it.
Not necessarily.
What problem I have or I don't understand is every year, since this is in Green Book, and it's already said that we're going to do it every year, we're going to do so much, and that's going to go into the reserve fund, and usually, the way I understand these years, we spend it. We don't change anything. It's part of the budgeting process every year for those things that we have as a routine. Are we reevaluate that and make sure that that money that we allocated is really reasonable? For example, we have to do roofing, or we have to do the, resurfacing the street. Is it really needed? We readjust that, or we automatically go and do it? Because my understanding is usually we automatically go do it regardless needed or not. How that works?
Sure.
Not doing that.
It's going to depend. So while Manuel makes his way up.
Yes.
So with regards to paving specifically, and he'll.
I just use that as example.
But let me continue with that example. There's certain levels of work that take place within the community that if you do it on a periodic basis, once every few years, you're going to pay a premium as opposed to you working with the same vendor. They know the work that's coming down the pipe. You're having a savings of money by making certain that you're receiving various parts of your community on an ongoing basis. If you dial it back by a year, you're going to ultimately, in a longer term, you're going to end up paying more. So with other areas outside of paving, it's going to
Excuse me,
depend. You may
that
want to be
part
more
I don't
strategic.
agree. Just a second. I do not agree with that at all. Absolutely not.
Can-
I'll tell you why. Go ahead.
I mean, I know Director Manuel is going to say something, but the reserves, especially I understand in mutuals, is an ongoing projects like painting. So you're not going to paint all 6,000 units in 1 year. all right? And so there's a, I don't know, 10 or 15-year cycle by which you do every year so many units. So that number doesn't change, the number of units doesn't change, but the cost per, in each year may go up because labor costs go up, paint costs go up, and everything goes up. So those things happen, but that comes out of the savings
That's
account.
not the question. The question
No,
I'm asking, that
no,
every
but that
year
is-
before
Just a
the
moment.
project starts, do
Point of
we
order.
evaluate the need?
Uh,
If the street needs to be, resurfaced,
that's-
if the
okay.
street is good,
Can
who's
you
going to
let,
make a decision
sir,
if we're going to do it
can
or
you,
not?
can you let me finish? Okay. You can evaluate each year.
No, we
what,
It's not a conversation.
Sorry.
We're
It's
going to
my
fight.
question.
we're going to fight after this. But anyway, each year, okay, we can evaluate whether or not we want to spend the money on that particular item that year. But that item doesn't go away because painting, we have to paint. Unless we just decide we're not going to paint it all.
I'm asking.
But-
I think what I'm saying that every year, as part of the budgeting, do we reevaluate the need of that particular for that year? We go look at the streets and say, okay, well, the streets that are on the schedule, they really, half of them don't need to be resurfaced. Who does that, and is that part of the budgeting?
Let us defer to our
Yeah,
maintenance
I
and
think the
construction
director-
Please
individual
do.
who knows a lot more
Yeah,
about it.
exactly.
Yes, we conduct an inspection of the street every year to confirm whether or not the streets need to be resurfaced or seal coated, and to identify any areas that are damaged enough that need to be reconstructed, dug out in place, and we do the same thing for concrete. We recently took a report to the M&C committee, which explained how we go out and inspect the asphalt, how we grade it, we give it a grade, and we only include in the upcoming budget those streets that have been graded as needing to be repaired. That information was presented to the M&C committee. During last year's budget cycle, there was questions raised because some board members went out and looked at the street and said, hey, it looks good to me, why are we replacing it? Your project manager is saying it needs to be repaired, but I went out and looked at it and it looks fine. So we hired a third-party pavement consultant to come in and look at those exact same streets that we had recommended for resurfacing, and we presented the report from the third-party consultant to the M&C committee. The consultant concurred that those streets should be repaved as staff had suggested. That doesn't mean that the board still has to approve it. The board still has the option to say, okay, thank you very much, but we're not going to do it, which is what they did in 2025.
And has
I
been
think?
done
Yeah.
from time
Right.
to time.
But at least they did it based on accurate information, not just from staff, but also from an outside consultant.
And when money is allocated out of the reserves, if it does not get used, it stays in the reserves. And I think it's
That's
important
correct.
that people recognize that. There's one thing is to allocate, we think this is what that is going to cost. And we as a responsible board have made sure that that money is there if it is needed. And if it is not needed from the reserves, it stays there. And it is then counted in the next year's budget. And so, thank you for
We
that.
have similar inspection programs for roofs, for termites, for painting we already talked about. So all of that is based on inspections. We don't ever do funding just because the life cycle's up. We
And-
always
and-
confirm it
Yeah,
before.
thank you. That's the question was asking. Is that part of the process of budgeting that is not automatically come out of the
Yes, sir.
green book and go into the operation?
It is.
So, well, that's what
Yeah,
we're
we
gonna do.
use the reserve study as a basis, but we go out and do inspections either with in-house staff if we have the expertise, or with contracted experts if we don't have the expertise.
And I recall a few years ago, directly related to that, that we used to paint every 10 years.
Now we
And
do-
the paint company said, why are you doing that? Our paint is warranted for 15 years. And so we switched because the paint company said the paint was designed to last that long in this particular climate. And the money saved, going from 10 years to 15 years, was used elsewhere. We do have to keep in mind, and then we will kind of move on, but we have to keep in mind this is a community that is aging. Nothing that we have is getting any newer. And so, unfortunately, we have to allocate funds to maintain it. Costs are going up every year. We chose to, and I hate to say it, but we chose to live in a community that has a lot of facilities. And as a board, we are obligated to provide funds to maintain them, and that is an obligation from the state.
We are not
So,
arguing that. We just make sure
I
that every dollar that we have
understand.
is spent wisely.
And the
That's
chair
all it is.
recognizes
Yeah,
Director
okay.
Park.
However, I have lived in this community for 12, 13 years. During that time, every single pave, every single seal coat budget or plan has been executed as planned. I have not seen anyone go out there, take a look yourself, and to see if that's good enough to sustain one more year or perhaps longer. That is what I want to see. I'd like to invite CEO of this unit. I can show her how they have seal coated some areas and paved the area that is already cracked on the street. Only after 2-3 years, I see a lot of cracks on the street already, and seal coated. I can show her so badly seal coated. That is what I'm talking about. Thank you.
And thank you. And Director Fox, did you have a comment?
Well, yeah.
You were smiling, and I didn't know if that meant you had a comment.
Steve, are you done with your presentation?
No.
Why don't you finish, and then I'll
Yes.
ask my question.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so we are on slide 8, and let me just give you an indication. So basically 20. So we're approaching the midway point, but I'll start picking up the speed here right now. So because this slide here, the reason I wanted to bring it to your attention is it's going to repeat itself with some highlights on a go-forward basis. But starting off at the top, and again, my explanations that I'm sharing with you right now have all been included in the staff report that were provided as part of your distribution on last week. So non-assessment revenues in 2025, it was 2615. That revenue has gone up to 36 and 4 cents, an increase in revenue of $9.89. You will note off on the right-hand side that we present them as how it's going to impact your overall assessments. So the more money you bring in terms of revenue, it has the impact to your monthly assessment is a decrease. So that's not a mistake off to the right-hand side showing a change from 26 to 36 is actually an increase in the revenue, but a decrease to your assessment. So the reason why that dollar amount has gone up by $9.89 is in anticipation of additional chargeable services specific to damage restorations that are going to be billed back to the residents. For instance, if you have a damage related to an alteration on your manor, that dollar amount is anticipated to be billed back to the resident. That is the revenue that's being captured here. Similarly, on your total expense line item, it is that $7.21 increase year over year in expense. That is most of that is coming from that same damage restoration expense. So overall, from a net operating perspective, we're anticipating your operating budget to decrease by $2.68. Your reserve contributions are going to go up by $12. And if you skip to the next slide, so we're highlighting here that, again, it started off as $176.86 in 2025, and the budget proposal for 26, version 3, is $188.86. And on the next slide, you'll see a breakdown. One thing to take into consideration is, as you've seen and maybe in some of the other slides, is within the reserve fund, you have three funds. You have the replacement fund, you have the elevator replacement fund, and you have the laundry replacement fund. So overall, the increase is $879,000 year over year. And the reason why we came up with that contribution is here before you. So quickly, you're going to see that highlighted line where it says 2026 for $181.86. I want you to realize that that number intentionally does not tie to the 188 you saw on the previous slides, because that 188, as I mentioned a second ago, is a combination of the replacement, the laundry, as well as the elevator. When you add up all three of those funds, it ties back to the 188 on the previous slide. Okay? So that 188 versus the 181 here, that's intentional. So the way you read this file here is based upon collecting for 12 months, the $181.86. 12 months of that times the 6,102 manners that you have in third equates to $13,317,000. We're anticipating about close to $900,000 in investment income, and that's all going to be offset by the $17 million that we have planned to expend out of this fund in 2025. So that will take your reserve balance down from the projected dollar amount in 2025 of about $18.9 million down to about $15.9 million. And that is one of the reasons why we anticipated needing that increase that I mentioned before. So you're needing to increase your assessment by $12 per manor per month in this fund specifically to maintain the ending balance that we have projected here. Okay, sticking with the reserves, but moving down to the next slide on slide number 12. So here is the $5, again, what I mentioned before, the $181.86 plus the $5 here, and then a smaller element in the laundry. That adds up to the $188. But likewise, we're sticking with about $3.8 million by the time we reach the end of 2026. So this dollar amount is climbing slowly, but not by about $200,000, almost equivalent. Well, pretty much double the investment expense. But this dollar amount is pretty much staying steady at about $3.8 million to $4 million the next couple of years. So hence the reason why that dollar amount is not going down is consistent with why we're saying just leave it at the $5 per manor per month. So we're not proposing any change here.
And
So-
that's that amount of increase, even already covering the unanticipated, at the beginning of the year, unanticipated fire mitigation, risk mitigation.
But we're talking about reserves here.
Okay.
So yeah, the fire
And
mitigation
that's
is going to
going
be
in disaster.
correct. So that's going to be a later slide again on slide 17, if I recall correctly. But here you have the last of the three elements of the reserve fund, and similarly off to the right-hand side, it went from, well, in previous years, back in 2023, it was 300. It's decreased to 226, down to 180, to down to 96. But we feel comfortable that after a couple of years, seeing in 2027 and 2028 that those dollar amounts will replenish, hence why we've not projected an increase here in the laundry replacement fund. So once again, when you take the 181 from the replacement, the elevator of 5 plus the 2 here for the laundry replacement fund, those two equal the 188.86 that I mentioned earlier. Then moving on to slide number 14, again, same slide with different highlight. We're talking about the restricted contributions. So in 2025, we had $11.53. In version 1 and version 2, we kept it at $11.53, but because of the big insurance savings that we saw in version 3, we are proposing to move that money to your disaster fund, increasing it by $21.35. And if you move on to slide number 15, you see a quick breakdown on the differences between the disaster fund and the unappropriated. But by and large, the big difference is the disaster fund increasing by about almost $1.3 million in terms of a contribution level. The next slide, on slide 16, you're going to see the activity. So disaster fund projected balance was 1153, moving up to 2863. So the overall contribution is to be about $2.1 million, and we're going to be increasing that balance to $5.6 million by year end. And again, the goal is to kind of increase that balance so we have enough funding available for the future. Lastly, for the restricted funds, we have the unappropriated fund here. You can see in 2024, we had a $25 contribution. In 2025, that balance was brought down to $0. And in 2026, we are recommending it be $425. And then on an annual basis, you'll see once we have the Green Book distributed that ongoing, our recommendation is to contribute $8 or about $500,000 per year to this fund. So right now you're sitting at $6.1 million projected balance ending for the current year of 2025, and based upon these contribution levels, it would come down to 6.4. So,
Okay.
moving
May I
on.
ask why you want to add $8, automatically to this fund? I mean, what's the reasoning?
Sure. So a number of years ago, you had a significant balance. So we're trying to, at the end of the day, this is your contingency fund. So your savings account in anticipation of other things. Like right now, we know that the disaster fund needs to pay out for the fire, so the Cal OSHA, right?
Okay.
So this is, again, another savings account that we're encouraging you to build up in order to maintain the any other future anticipated expenditures. If all of a sudden insurance, once again, climbs back up, if utilities climb back up, you have the ability to lower your contributions to this fund and adjust your operating fund for those increases. By contributing to this fund, it allows you to smooth your increases over the course of the year. If ultimately you have a $2 million increase for an unknown, at this time, operating expenditure, you can pull from this fund. That way, your residents don't feel sharp increases or decreases year over
So
year.
look at it as a saving account?
It's exactly a savings
That's
account.
exactly what
it's
it
exactly
is.
what this is.
And do we really need $10 million in 2030?
In 2030, so we can ultimately bring down that.
Can be revised.
I know,
Yeah.
I'm just
It's a good
asking why
question.
we,
Yeah.
you
So
know, why-
we've maintained $8 because we're trying to get that to increase over time. Could you? And again, this is outside this meeting here. Could we change the 27 through 30 to $5? Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
So
Yeah,
yeah, because
that's
we
an
don't really have
option that
planned
we can-
expenditures coming
Okay.
from
Okay,
this at this
and
time.
Robert,
I guess since I see Kurt sitting in the audience, our landscape person,
and he's smiling.
and given that the CAL FIRE requirements under the new law for the mitigation that we have to engage in, a lot of that is landscaping mitigation. And we're talking about approximately $3 million for this coming year, as I understand it. And I guess, Kurt, I'd like to hear from you, just to put it into context, what are we looking at over the next, because we have 3 years to complete the project, correct? If you could address what you think the overall estimated cost, given what we know at this moment in time, might be over the next 3 years.
And that would be a general
Yeah.
figure, not,
I just want to put in context for the members, because the other money that we're putting into some of the other funds will, I think, eventually be used, but I'd like you to address that issue if you wouldn't mind.
It's hard to give a safe estimate as the laws are still evolving. They're actually meeting today to go over it. I provided the draft report to the board previously. They're going over and reviewing that again as we speak. So without knowing what they're going to exactly change, but you are in the right, I want to say, ballpark. We are looking between $1 and $3 million a year over the next 3 to 5 years even. We're talking with CAL FIRE that we might be able to get a little bit extra time on it. if we are proceeding with a plan, but they do plan on enforcing it at some point, as long as we're working with them. But it is going to be significant cost no matter what it ends up to be, but I can't give you a safe estimate until we know exactly what they're going to do. But I think for what you're talking about today, round numbers at $1 to $3 million a year is a safe estimate.
How much?
$1 to $3 million.
1 to
a year.
3?
Okay, and that isn't counting what we might have to do for turf,
That's not even counting.
That's not even thinking about
That's a completely
it.
separate issue.
and that is for those listening who may not be aware, that has to do with turf, non-functional turf. They still haven't defined what non-functional turf is. The last one was, if the only one walking across the lawn in a month is the landscaper, it's probably non-functional. That was as close as they came. So we're talking about several unknowns. And I think only in general to think about, especially for those who are listening either here or at home, we have a community where facilities are aging, and we have things like CAL FIRE saying, and by the way, you might want to be planning on spending between $1 and $3 million a year on fire mitigation things that we haven't told you what they are yet, but we will. And the non-functional turf, we're fortunate that most of our turf is watered by recycled water, but not all of it. So I mention them only because people say, why does it go up every year? It's sort of hard to have it go in any other direction. So the question is, how much? Thank you. So that's just comment. And thank you very much, Kurt. And Steve, are you?
A couple more slides,
Okay.
and then we'll wrap it up.
The messenger?
For the resident, because you say 1 to 3 million a year, that's a really big range.
Yes, it is.
And then on top of that, it may take about 3-4 years. So you're talking about 4 million to 12 million range.
That's correct.
So that's really big range for resident to maybe have to come up with it, okay? Because we have to do it, that's a state mandate. So we don't have much choice.
That's correct.
But you're talking about the 4 to 12 million next to 3-4 years. And I like to see that little bit nailed down, little bit narrow range here than as it is. But whatever it is.
But at the
okay.
same time, you're expressing concern that the per man or per month is going up, and so it's sort of hard to figure that out.
Yeah, that's a lot of money for the resident, but
Yes,
the
it
state
is.
mandate, we don't have much choice. So either, because the state mandate, so we
is
have
what
to
it
come up with our own, resident pocket, bring it on more, or we have to cut it down to other expense to somehow. And it's our choice or resident choice. So we're gonna ask a resident come up with more money, or we can compromise, we can lower our operation budget or our reserve fund, whatever, and then they have to come up in the middle road, or we have to, we have to make some choice. And then I have other questions for the
Well,
Steve.
let him finish.
2 more slides.
We decided that we would let him finish, and then we will ask.
2 more slides.
And Director Fox was ahead of you before.
Sure. So I'll be brief. So on slide number 18, just quickly, this has to do with the Garden Villa Rec Room. So in our previous presentation, we showed that we were proposing to increase the 2026 business plan from $6.50 to $7. But we had a representative from the Garden Villa Rec Room who had wished to maintain that dollar amount at $6.50. So we have made that small change here. Dollar for dollar, because we're dealing with a smaller number of properties, it's not as impactful as if you're applying it to all 6,000 residences. The thing that we had not changed in this iteration of the budget is for an expenditures, we have shown that there is $137,000. I believe he was also questioning whether all that dollar amount was going to be expended, but we did not change that here unless we get further details. The finalized budget will be as you see it here. Ultimately, when the money is spent, there's control. We don't necessarily say that we're going to spend all that $137,000. That'll be up to discussion from the committee. But we do propose that that balance is going to decrease $81,000.
And that is for the Garden Villas.
For the garden building, correct. Again, to sum up, you're looking at that same slide once again. So the increase for version 3 proposal before you is going to bring up the total to $909.56. That is your total basic assessment. Does not include additional surcharges if those apply to you. And then final sum up slide is the same presentation that you saw earlier in the slide deck, and that is showing you the differences for both the property insurance and the disaster, more or less offsetting each other. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, and I would like to recognize Director Fox, who had some questions earlier and wanted to wait.
Well, thank you. I just, a few questions, then a few comments. Okay, going back to the disaster fund is specifically for what now?
So, as it's defined, it's intended for damage to property that's not covered by insurance. It also handles things like write-offs for your receivables, as well as, and that's pretty much it. So items that are not covered by insurance and damage to the community. So anything, it's not required by Civil Code. It's an operating fund. So it's basically another savings account that we use specifically.
So this is money to help out
Absolutely.
the residents.
The fire mitigation.
In the village who may be underinsured.
No.
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 Then what is it?
No.
Or deductible.
This is for.
It's our deductible
Yeah.
against our insurance
Correct.
if there's a disaster.
Correct, yes.
Correct. This is for mutual owned property.
Okay, and so right at the end of the year, we're going to be around 5 million ending balance.
Correct.
How much is our deductible?
100,000.
What?
100,000?
How much under our insurance, if there was a
Property insurance
disaster?
deductible is $100,000.
100,000?
100,000 is our property insurance deductible.
Per property?
No,
or
no.
For the entire
Per
village?
incident.
Per incident.
Per incident.
Okay, so then, can of worms. Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's 100,000 per incident, God forbid there's an earthquake, that's one incident.
No, that insurance, that's separate insurance. We have separate earthquake insurance,
Okay, let's
which
say
is
there's a
different.
fire,
It's fine.
that's one incident.
Yeah.
So we could use $100,000 of this towards whatever had to be done because of the fire, right? Okay, next question.
Can
I
I
don't-
add, can
what?
I add to that for you, if you don't mind?
Did I ask something?
No, go ahead.
Okay, unappropriated funds. What is that?
That is your true savings account. That is for, if you were to have an overrun in your budget, so you would pull that from your contingency account. If you were to have additional operating expenditures that were unplanned, you can pull from that. It is a savings account that effectively you have the ability to transfer that money as the board sees fit.
So as I'm looking at this, it looks to me that basically it's a savings account that's growing year by $500,000 or whatever, right? That's anticipated going forward?
So this also account, as I mentioned earlier, allows you to build in a steady increase or decrease to your assessments, right? So you can see that if you can turn to slide number 17, please. So you can see that in 2022, that contribution was eliminated. So you had some higher expenses. I believe that had to do with property insurance back then in both 22 and 23. So you eliminated those expenses because at that time you had a significant increase. And then in 2024, rather than taking your assessment, hang tight for one moment. Rather than taking your assessment down dramatically because you didn't have those significant increases year over year, you took that money and you put it into your contribution for this fund here. So in 2024, you contributed $25.47. Then in 2025, you had other expenditures that caused you to increase. So, but rather than maintaining that level of contribution, you took it away, which was the appropriate thing to do at the time, because by taking that away, you were able to maintain your overall year-over-year contribution at a 5% increase. So this year, you're putting it back in at $4, you're easing back into it to maintain that that 5%. Next year, if you were at a 6% increase, you could dial that back in order to maintain that 5% increase.
Okay, so I'm looking here at an account that has $6 million there, and we're projecting it to be, assuming we did $8, close to $10 million at the end of 2030. And we're also, on the other hand, looking how we're going to raise money for this fire project. And I don't know the cash flow, but it seems to me like we're always in a surplus in third, right? So if that's the case, I don't know why we don't appropriate some of this to fund a year of the firework that needs to be done, maybe more, because this to me it seems to make sense to me. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not seeing the big picture, but we've got $6 million sitting here, and to pull $2 or $3 million out and fund the first year and let's get going on this fire stuff, because time's a wasting. And then we can build into 27, 28, rebuild this, or instead of this, put more money to the fire project, which is like of utmost importance because of the mandate and also to the threat to the homes. That's just my thought. That's all I have to say about that. Let's look at going back to the discussion and the budget for 26. In your discussion of compensation, you're planning on 9 more full-time equivalents, right? And that's, the wages are going up $1,014,000. And in the caption, it says that we're transitioning from outside services to in-house. And then on top of that, you're going to have benefits at a 44 or 45% clip on those wages, because the benefits are $447 increase and the compensation is $1,014,000 increase. So however that works out, my question is, if I look a little further and look at the outside services, I see that our outside services are going down by $390,000. So I'm wondering how if we're transitioning from outside services to in-house wages, how that goes from a decrease of $390,000 for outside services, which is all encompassing and they pay their own benefits, to basically $1,450,000 of wages with benefits.
Is that also going from the 4 to 6 cycles, or had that already been figured?
This is
I
just.
just want to make sure.
This is
because it's
just
in-house.
paying people.
9 FTEs.
Sure.
But we have.
So,
extra.
yeah, so a couple different elements. So you mentioned that the salaries are going up by a certain dollar amount, and then the compensation is going up as a percentage to the tune of 45 or whatever you had referenced. So, but they're independent of one another, right? So your benefits have increased, but as a percentage, so when you're comparing dollars for dollars, yes. So your salaries are only going up by 4%, but your compensation in benefits, so those are going up by more, right? So from workers' compensation specifically, those expenses, we're not increasing the number. We're not seeing an increase in claims, but workers' compensation, just by the nature of that work, is going up in terms of cost. We're seeing more legal expenses associated with it, so on and so forth. So that explains the 45% increase, or whatever the math turned out to be. With regards to the decrease in outside services, so what we mentioned before, the primary contributor to that decrease is the moving the labor from the landscape to in-house. But there's other offsets as well. There's other areas of the business that are increasing from an outside services, right? So as you would imagine, any other additional work that we do, whether it's epoxy or whether it's any other service that we're doing for M&C, landscape, so on and so forth, year over year, those are going up, right? So that $300,000, $389, is not the exact dollar amount for moving that labor from outside to inside, if that helps at all, right? Again, there's other factors that are going up. We can provide you those details, and I can show program by program, once again, in the schedule that we provided back in June. Actually, it was in early July that we distributed, on July 3rd, I want to say. We have the detail from outside services that you can see. Each program has gone up, offset by the decrease in landscape.
Okay, next question, back on compensation. So the budget for 26 anticipates additional 9 FTEs.
Yes, sir.
What did we anticipate in 2025 for additional full-time employees?
From 24 to 25, thank you. I don't have 24 included in here, actually.
And the same question for 24 also.
So again, when we came to this presentation in the previous year, this was 3.5 hours. I mean, we're at an hour and a half now, but I don't have that number readily available in front of me, but it's accessible and I will send it afterwards. So if
Okay.
you're looking for the
My
year-over-year
point
increase-
is, and maybe I'm off base, but we're anticipating 9 full-time equivalents for 2026 that we budgeted $1 million for, whatever it is. I recall that we had all this budgeted money for 25 for new hirings that we couldn't seem to hire anybody, hence the outside contractors. We probably had the same problem in 24 and going back. I think this builds every year. We're going to hire 8 more people. Next year, 9 more people. How much of the $9.3 million of wages budgeted are for hirings that go back 3 years that haven't been filled?
Sure, and I can address that comment. So as we've shared in previous presentations, so we have a total number of employees that we have authority to hire from a VMS perspective, and that's about 733 employees that we have the ability to go out and hire. However, from a funding perspective, we anticipate that we're not going to be able to bring in those hires. So when you hear that we're unable to hire in various positions, right? So we are looking, and that does tie to the larger 733 count of employees that are approved for hire. But when it comes to the actual billing you via your assessments, there's about 33 less, so 700. So we have built that into that count. We know that we're not going to be able to fill every single position as timely as we would like to, just give the nature of hiring practices. Furthermore, we've done an improved job in recent months as we have in previous years. We have less open positions as we speak right now than we did a year ago, and we anticipate that going down. One of the things that we did in this budget compared to 2025 is we had a total count of employees, we call it a vacancy factor, those numbers of employees that we don't anticipate being able to fill. So if we don't fill those positions, we need to use outside services. So this year, we've decided to eliminate some of those vacancies in order to, as opposed to paying an outside service to do the work, we're bringing it back in-house. So it's not growing. Forgive me for not having the slide here in front of us. In an earlier iteration, we showed that the employee count has decreased, and then it did tick up in the current year.
So you're saying 733 employees?
Is the official count, and this is not just for third, that is a total count for all VMS employees.
How many of them would be for third?
We don't break it down by that.
Wild guess, 40%, half?
47%.
47%.
It seems high.
That seems high.
How many of the 733 employees are really, would you say, are third mutual designated?
They're not designated for third. For example, depending on what we use for compliance, we get billed for the amount of time that we use the compliance people. We get billed for the amount of time that they're cutting our grass, but they're also cutting United's grass.
Okay, so this is what I'm asking. If I take the 9.3 million of employee compensation for 2026, divide by 733, it's about $12,600 per employee. If I looked at United's budget and the GRF budget, and I divided their allocation of compensation by 733, I'm trying to build up to what the average cost per employee is.
So, unfortunately, you won't be able to do it that way. So, the dollar amount that you're referring to, the $9.3 million that third is budgeting in 2026, that is your operating alone. So that does not include the expenses for labor that are being billed for your reserves, right? So there's a lot of, if you want to have this discussion, we probably present something at a later time, but you won't be able to quickly find out an average salary. Like you can't take all three corporations' operating budgets, add up all those dollar amounts, and divide by 700 employees and come up with an average dollar amount. Because once again, you have to include the reserves, you have to include other factors as well.
Okay.
But if you let us know the reason why you're looking for that information, we might be able to speak to it right now and address that comment.
I'm just curious what's behind some of these numbers. Okay, let's move on. On page 6, reserves, line 22, replacement fund. It's going up like $900,000 year over year. These are the reserves, correct?
Correct. So
Okay.
let me get that slide on screen. What slide was it one more time?
No, it's
It's,
page 6.
It's not a slide, it's page
6 out of 45.
6 of 20.
Got it. The business plan.
Line 22.
Okay.
Replacement fund, it was 12.4 million in 25, it's 13.3 million in 26.
Correct.
Okay, so my question is, I think I've mentioned this in earlier meetings, but nevertheless, the last reserve study, we base our funding of reserves based on reserve studies, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So my experience with reserve studies is that the company will go through and do their analysis of item by item, line by line, and this item has a 10-year replacement, and this one is 20 years, and this one is 4 years, or whatever, and they do a whole big chart, and they say, okay, based on their allocations, this is how much money we have, this is the shortfall, this is what we need, we have 11 years to get to be fully funded. So my question is, the reserve study, how much does it say we should be putting into reserves every year?
Sure. So in everything you just got done saying, we obviously do here as well. So in the business plan from your previous year, we've shared all that information. So the current one is underway. We'll be done with it by the end of the week, but it wasn't available to be shared here. Every year, your specific question is how much do they recommend? They always come through and make a recommendation of a significant dollar. So for instance, last year, the reserve specialist was asking you to contribute $14.5 million. That was their request to get you to the funding balance. The board ultimately decided to contribute $12,950,000, so 13, so $1.5 million underfunding what the reserve specialists had told you to do. I would anticipate a similar scenario here. Even though you're seeing it increase by $12 per man or per month, or effectively $1 million, it's still going to be under what the reserve specialist is going to be recommending. But based upon the work that is being done by the various departments, the anticipated funding that we see going forward, as we showed on some of the subsequent slides, we feel that what you're contributing is adequate. Last year, again, forgive me for not being able to display this on screen, but from a funding perspective, anything less than 30% per the industry norms is designated as at risk for special assessment.
And where are we now?
So this year for 2025, you were at 26.7. So what we're anticipating for the 2026 business plan, so preliminary, you're at 29 point something, right? So we're still kind of working out the kinks, but you're just shy of 30, but effectively 30%. And I don't want anybody to be overly concerned that might be listening. You have substantial funds. You're a much bigger organization than an association that may have 200 homes, right? The fact that you have $25 to $30 million in available funds, you are not at risk of a special assessment. That way we're comfortable keeping you where you're at. So you'll see in the 30-year plan that here is the proposal to get you at a much higher balance. But whether you ultimately get there in 30 years may not be necessarily staff's recommendation. We're comfortable with you staying at 30%, which is where you're at approximately right now.
Okay. Page 11 of 25, just as a point of information or question. The outside services, you got a number sitting there in the reserves of 12.2 million. What is that?
So this is the dollar amount of what we anticipate spending in 2026. So
On the reserves.
Yeah, out of the reserves, correct. So hang tight for 1 second. Correct. So forgive me.
And the detail of that would be on attachment 5, if I'm not mistaken?
Correct.
Okay. Fair enough.
So let's see. If we take and from a reserves perspective, I can dial this number real quick. I'll have Karina bring it up momentarily. So can you turn to, oh, you're good. So next page. So if you look over to the right-hand side, you're going to see a header that says outside services. So you're going to see for M&C, there is $8.5 million coming out of M&C for outside services. And just below it, you're going to see for landscape services another 3.7. So you add up those two, you're going to get back to about the $12.2 million that we recorded on the previous slide.
Okay. Since we're on this page, so M&C is happy with spending an extra $2.2 million over last year?
When you say happy, I mean, these are at the directions of the committees and the boards.
I'm asking M&C.
Thank you. Okay, sorry.
Because last year, 2025 budget was 10.4. The 2024 actuals, 10.7. Year before was 9. Year before was 7.6. And now M&C budget for this year is 12.6, which is a $2.2 million increase in expenditures. And we're happy with that? No. Well, that's good to know.
But if I could point out, if I can point out though, just keeping things in line, if you look at history, the biggest component of that $2.2 billion is coming over from wasteline remediation and underneath it as well as the water lines, so lines 36 and 37. In 24, we were spending 1.6 for wasteline remediation, but in 25, we budgeted $1 million less. So we budgeted $500,000. So now they're asking to increase it by $1 million, which is still $1 million less than was originally requested in our version 1 budget. So it went from actually I want to say $3 million. It went from originally $3 million, and based upon the direction of this board and the committees, it was brought down to 1.5.
Plus the million for, let's see, we got the wasteline remediation, the water lines, copper pipe remediation.
Yeah, these are all epoxy lining that we just talked
And
at
this
the
is all the
beginning
stuff we're
and all of-
talking about, and this is all coming out of reserves.
Correct. And that's what we talked about, that, how we're going to do this smarter rather than.
But I was supposed to be paying attention when you talked about that.
Oh, you didn't?
Okay.
And if you don't spend it, then it stays there.
Well,
Yeah, if you
I
don't
don't want to
use
just
it, you lose
allocate
it,
things
right?
if I don't want to spend it. I want to do the right.
I didn't say if you
budgeting.
want to. I said if for some reason you do not spend it, it is
Of
there
course.
and a benefit the following year.
But on the surface, a CPA going to ask the question, what the hell are you doing? Why are you putting money in there if you don't want to spend it?
That's all I do is ask questions. I don't have any answers.
Well, you have a right to ask the question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
You are welcome, sir.
Okay. Do you have any more?
No, go ahead.
Okay, very good. Yes.
Thank you. Let's go simple one. Page 12 of 25. And the excess of revenue over expense, is that minus or plus? 31 million, 60 million?
Sure.
Is that minus or plus?
It's a minus. So you have revenues of $1.2 million. Yet you have, and this is planned, right? You have $1.2 million of revenue coming in, and that's purely from your investment income. The only income you receive on your reserve is the investment, right? And that's offset with total expenses of $17.2 million. So the net of those $2 amounts is effectively $16 million.
So you are not counting on any assessment income? Revenue.
So, correct. This is just kind of a detail of your expenses, correct?
So this is without the assessment?
This is without the assessments.
Okay,
Absolutely.
with the assessment it will be positive?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then let's say slide, any slide, I think 11, let's say look at the replacement reserve fund slide 11. It's same in 11, 12 and all that, but when you look at the replacement reserve fund, annually we are using expenditure is the most we used, will be using next year and following about 17 million. Is that correct? We are expecting that, right?
Correct.
And then with that, we still have, after 17 million, we still have about 15 million left in our pocket,
Correct.
right? So we have a lot, in a way, in my own home, I'm pretty rich. Because after all that expense, I still have a 15 million or a whole year replacement
Sure.
in my pocket.
Correct.
So I have twice more than I expected, right, in my pocket right now. So when you look at elevator replacement, I have two questions in that regard. Is that the PPM? PMPM is, let's say, $5. Is that for all household, 6,000 household, or only whoever has an elevator, you are charging it?
Everyone contributes.
Everybody.
So everybody, so 6,000.
Yes,
you know.
6,102.
So it's that. But you are surcharging to those who has elevator, right?
On top of it, correct, yes.
On top of that.
Correct, on top of that. So this is, everything we've discussed for the most part today has been your basic assessment, and that applies to all residents of Third. On top of that, you also have some surcharges that are unique to individuals with the garden villa, the rec room, as well as the elevators as well. So
Okay.
smaller charges, but yes.
So it's not just the user expense, but you charging everybody plus user expense, user charging, right? Then
If I understand you
you're
correctly,
doubled
yes.
up.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Then also expenditure, you look at it, it's about 200 grand every year, plus minus.
Correct.
And then
For the
you have a
elevator.
reserve ending balance is more than 3 million.
Correct.
So I'm very, very, very rich.
So
I'm using 200 grand. I have a 3 million in my pocket after that used, right? I don't know, I don't have a wife, so, but anyhow, so laundry expense is same thing, right?
Correct.
Same thing is you charging $1, $2, and then on top of that you are using, whoever has a laundry, you are surcharging it, right? And then also same, pretty much similar, more than what you expenditure. And then the unappropriated, page, slide 17, also annual expenses not more than $500,000, and then your remaining balance is more than 6 million.
You're talking about the reserves.
Yeah, this is unappropriated disaster now. We're going to disaster. So what I'm saying is, annually every year we are spending about $500,000, less than not even $500,000, less than $500,000, but we have about 6 million in our pocket.
yes.
Okay, so when you look at when we have a real
We're not
disaster,
30%.
what would happen is when we really happen, first cover insurance covers. Then second, either state or federal FEMA's coming in. Okay, so we are not counting that at all, right? And then
We're not talking about that.
If there was-
I think, though, we do have to remember, we also heard him say we are below what those people who do reserve studies say we should have.
yeah.
So, because we have a
Yeah, I
very large
understand that,
community
but what
that
I'm
needs to
looking
have
at
some
the-
money.
FEMA doesn't come in here.
And they don't,
This is a private community. FEMA will not come in here.
The whole area depend on how you disaster is declared. Okay, it's they declared, the federal government declared any area is a disaster, FEMA will come in. Okay, and so what I'm saying is basically disaster fund also we are using about 1.5 million annually last 10 years. And then we have a reserve in our, after that use, we have a pocket about $6 million. So I don't know how I'm gonna run my own household. If it's my own household, I'm going to expect using 1.5 million, and then after all that use, I still have more than 6 million in my pocket.
So you're suggesting we be lower, even
I don't know.
lower
Is
now
that, what
than we
I'm
are?
saying is that right way to run the business or household?
So if I can address your first comments with regards to the reserves. So when you look at them individually, the replacement, the elevator, and the laundry, I would agree that the elevator fund may look rich, the fact that we spend on average $250,000, but we have a $3 billion balance. But when you add up all three together, which is effectively one reserve fund, your outside expert is telling you that you do not have
enough
sufficient
money.
funding compared to your peers, right? So arguably, you're right. So arguably, we should take funding from one fund and one reserve fund and move it to another reserve fund. But we don't need to do that at this time. So the funding is in place. You have adequate funding in each that we're comfortable with. I don't think any changes need to be taken. But you've been here for a few years, but I know that often conversations I've had with new board members that come on is the order of magnitude. When you come in from your own household, you look at things maybe $1,000, $10,000 of expenses. But oftentimes when the laws change to a corporation, your expenditures are much more than $5,000, $10,000. You have to have an unforeseen expenditure of $3 million, $5 million. Again, just add a couple extra zeros to what you're used to seeing at home. So are you adequately funded here in third? I would say yes, and I would recommend you don't decrease anything from what you're doing now. One of the strengths of third is you have a strong balance sheet. You can weather the storms when you have big law changes that may come through that affect certain things. Other communities outside Laguna Woods Village experience these things, and they have to go to their members and request a special assessment. I don't foresee that being an issue, knock on wood, from the third, because even if you had to raise your assessments, even if you had a big expenditure to come through, you probably wouldn't need to you by no means would need a special assessment. I say that with a caveat, right? I don't know exactly what's going to be in the near future. But if you had a big law change, you wouldn't need to go to your members directly, because you have a strong balance sheet. You have substantial savings, not excessive, but substantial savings to weather those storms, right? You are protecting your members by charging them an adequate assessment on a monthly basis, on an annual basis.
Yeah, if I'm running business, I used to do that because I had a group I run, and then also my own household. If I expect a disaster fund or reserve or whatever replacement, let's say I'm expecting next year about $1 million. At the most, I'll keep about $2 million. But right now, we are keeping about $6-7 million.
So
Maybe as Donna said, this is what required. So be it then.
Well, as I say, it sounds like you're suggesting we go even lower than we already are in our reserves, which isn't low, but those experts say we should even have more. So so we can clarify. You had a question, SK?
Yeah, page 14. First, building structures. We increased 25%. Is that because we approved the supplemental appropriation for 2025? That's why it went up to $3 million from $2.4 million?
Manuel, are you able to speak to this? In the meantime, I'll see if I can pull up the detailed schedule for this.
Thank you. While Steve pulls up the, if you do the drop-down menu, you'll see, I believe we budgeted, and the committee recommended budgeting an increased amount this coming year for dry rot repairs.
Okay.
Outside services for dry rot repairs.
Okay. Number 33, paving and concrete. Is that include the seal coat also?
Yes.
Okay, I have further questions. That we spent 167, 2024, 157, 2025, 167. Now we're asking 611,000. Is that that's a substantial increase?
Yeah, what you're seeing in 2023, in 2024 and 2025 is the reflective of the board cutting the budget those years for paving.
Yes.
It wasn't what the staff budgeted or recommended. So the
I know that.
budget was more, the board cut it back.
Right, I understand
So
that.
that's why those numbers are lower.
Those 6 streets that you're going to repave still patched up and still look pretty good to me. Number 34, roof. Increases, is it roof? No, 35, exterior walls. 24,000 in 2025, 28,000 in 2024, 74,000 this year budget. Any reason of that increase? Any specific that we ought to repair?
I don't remember what the reason for the increase is. Do you have that, Steve?
Okay,
Sorry.
okay.
Multitasking. What was the question?
Exterior walls. Line 35. In 2024, 28,000. 2025, 24,000.
Sure.
And then 2026, you budgeted for 74,000. Oh, you don't have to answer that today, but you can
Yeah.
submit
Well, it was
later.
in our original presentation on the budget. I just don't have that information. I don't know if you
I don't
have it
think
or
we
not.
went through this detail at that time.
Oh, we
either.
did, but I don't remember off the top of my head what it
Okay.
was.
So it appears that we have increased funding for Shepherd's Crook.
Oh, that's a Shepherd's Crook, okay.
Thank you, Steve.
So previous boards had done away with the Shepherd's Crook.
Right.
And in 2026, we added $50,000 specific to that project.
Okay, that's fine. Now, 36, waistline remediation, 1.5, we cut the budget to 2025, 500,000. In fact, we decreased that $1 million last year. We went back to 1.5. Is that what you're proposing for?
That's our recommendation, yes.
Recommendation. So, and the same thing goes true with the water line from 500,000 to $1 million.
Correct. That's what staff's recommending.
Okay, yeah, okay, so
And we're eliminating the 700,000 that you had on the next slide
okay,
to offset that.
okay. And also, laundry appliances, 41, 164,000 in 2024. Now we're asking 2026, almost $200,000. I thought laundry machine issue's been resolved, so we don't need as many laundry machine replacement. Since last year, we changed from Maytag to Speed Queen.
Correct.
Yeah, so I'm wondering why it's higher compared to last year, that much. It's just simply inflation, or?
I'd have to look into it deeper. I can't tell you right now what it was.
Sure. So, I mean, you can see here, again, kind of small, but here you go. Thank you, Karina. So scroll down a little bit. So you're looking at $162,000 was spent in 2024, $116,000 is budgeted, and then we're anticipating materials. I believe, based on recollection, it had to do with materials, the costs anticipating going up.
Yeah, material means maybe machine.
Correct.
Yeah.
So maybe the volume is not as high, but the cost of the equipment is higher.
The-
You know?
I believe the speed, we changed it from Maytag to Speed Queen.
Sure.
I don't see that much increase on 1 year period.
I'd have to look into it deeper. I don't have that level
Yeah.
of detail here.
So, you know me well. I'm not gonna dwell, I'm not gonna let it go. I'm gonna find out what cause of these so high.
Yeah, I'm sure we have the information, we just don't have it here
Yes,
today.
please.
Okay, yeah.
Please.
But as a reminder, again, these are expenditures. What you're doing as part of the budget is setting aside money, right? Ultimately, when it comes to,
I
especially from the
understand.
reserve perspective.
I understand, I understand, I understand. But once you budget it, you try to spend that much money, period. Thank you.
Yes, Raisin.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the wastewater remediation and the copper line remediation. Can you shed some light on 2025 when we had 500,000 in each? Do we have, Director Gomez, what kind of problem we faced when we had 500,000 that now we have to go to 1.5 million?
That's a good question.
No, I know. I'm going to see if the 500,000 that we did 2025 was insufficient and why that we now proposing to go to the, reserve for 1.5 million and $1 million. How we can justify that from 2025 to 20. I understand that in 2024 we do that and we did couple line, the lining, and we decided to do different. And from 2025 to 2026, what happened in 2025 with the 500,000 in each that justified we go to 1 million and 1.5 million in 2026?
The 500,000 that was allocated in 2025 was sufficient to reline 3 buildings. We had planned to do 6 or 8, but with the reduced budget, we were only able to do 3.
Yeah,
So
the
if-
one that
if-
we didn't do reline, we have problem?
Yes. So all we're doing is deferring that to a future year. So the longer you defer, the more problems you're going to have. So
What
as a
kind of problem?
reminder,
I haven't
the way
heard
we-
any problem with it, with the leaks.
the way we identify the buildings that are targeted for relining is based on the number of stoppages that we have experienced at that building. So those that have a high number of problems, instead of just continuing to go back and cleaning it out and going back again and making repairs, we're recommending those for lining. And so you received an email over the weekend from somebody upset that their building was supposed to be lined and now is getting postponed. And so that's the consequence of not budgeting a higher amount.
But that's not, they complain because they were on a schedule and they
Right.
don't know why the schedule is not done. We discussed that the
It wasn't that-
schedule indiscriminately going and doing the lining is not what we want. We want to look at the waistline and make sure that it warranted. Because if we do clean it and we send the camera and there is no problem, why we want to reline the cast iron piping underneath there? Previously, we decided everything need to be relined. We're just going to go and do it. The question is, that's a smart way to do it. And my answer to that is that it's not smart that we indiscriminately, just like the street, we go and pave the street because we need it or not. We said we're going to look at it. The building with a problem, we're going to clean it up. And if we need it, if the pipe is cracked or broken, then either we have to replace or we have to reline. Other than that, the cleaning should do the job, and that saves us money. And we put those buildings that were scheduled for relining on the schedule, we clean it up. If there is no problem, move on. They want to know why nothing has been done. It's not because it's not the reline, it's why you put me on the schedule and you're not telling me what's going on. And that's the lack of communication, that we're going to just clean it up and then decide what we want to do with it. What I'm hearing from the MNC saying that the cleaning up is going to reduce the life of the pipe.
Okay,
I'm not going to get into the technical discussion of it, but I want to see why from 500,000 from last year that we didn't have much of problem with some of the issues. We're going to 1.5 million and 1 million this year because we want to do all the relining all of those pipe again without
All right, SK and then Robert.
Robert, you go first.
I just have one question. Steve, did I hear you earlier say that we actually spent $1.6 million on
Relining.
relining?
2024.
2024 we did, correct.
2024, spent 1.6, okay.
Yeah, that was
So
All right, that's okay. I misunderstood.
what I want to make a comment is this.
I misunderstood.
I have heard a lot of complaining about sewer line backup, sewer line issues and so forth. Good example, 4008 is my building. We had already water line break couple times, sewer line couple times, backup. And then the other one is the 4009 was sewer line backup and really, really bad water leaking because of backup. Those were caused by, one, root. The other one is just simply clogging. I have never so far complaining that without lining we had this problem.
And-
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because we heard that they are going to look now and see what the problem is, and that's fine. But the fact is, I believe I heard you say that you only do this with buildings with problems. And so the plan now is to investigate them and cover sufficient funds. And if those don't get spent this coming year, the budget will be reduced the following year. So,
Good, thank you.
yes. All right, anything else?
If I may, I also have, Manuel, if you can stay close, we have one more slide having to do with budget considerations. So
That's the-
at the MNC committee, there was a recommendation to allocate $18,000 for installation of some laminate fire alarm signs in the Garden Villa buildings, and an additional $140,000, again, from the reserve for gutter systems. So the request of the board here today is whether or not you would like to include that on the expenditures. Again, it ultimately is not going to address
It
the
looks like it's
funding
gonna
perspective.
change anything.
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a small amount. How much would that influence the,
So the only, it would not influence the business plan. The contributions, we're not making any suggestions to change anything. But if you, forgive me, Karina, go back one more time.
Allows them to add to the.
So go back to the slide that has our programs reports. There you go. So it's going to add to this. It's going to change what we have recommended on the 2026 in black. The request is to increase it to the tune of about $160,000.
and will it affect the overall budget, was the question.
No.
I'm saying it looked very small. That's why I was wondering why we had to deal with it today.
Can we go back to slides?
We can go anywhere you'd like.
Yeah, right there.
But please, I'm sorry, but from a direction perspective, before we make any changes to the budget, we're looking for direction from the board. So the MNC made a recommendation to include these dollar amounts,
Yes.
but we're looking for the board at this point definitely to opine
Is
one way or
this,
the
let
other.
me ask, we have a board meeting tomorrow. Is that something more appropriate to give the direction
I
then or
think
not?
this is the.
This is a very
this is
small
the-
amount of money,
Yeah,
but,
this is the, but, the
And-
finance, and you can go ahead and add it.
and I was
to the
going to say
budget.
that for
This
those.
is for the next year's budget.
Yeah, for those listening, because of our responsibility financially, every single member of the Third Mutual Board is a member of the Finance Committee.
Yeah.
Is this just a metal laminate sign?
Yes, this
Just
is
This
fire.
is signed, that's pennies.
Correct, for the 18,000, correct.
I'll go ahead and move that we
Okay.
approve both of these items added to the budget.
Right, I concur with it.
You second?
Okay.
I have one question, Mr. Gomez, what about the railing? Because that was another item that you want to look at
I
and
thought
see
that
if
was
that's
the
going to be added also.
The
That
what?
was the answer. the
Railing
railing?
for the third, for the three-story
Yeah,
building.
but I thought
The
that
board
was.
already allocated a budget for that in
So we are
2025.
good?
So you've already budgeted for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Then it was
So if we can
moved
go
and
back to the
second.
motion?
It moved and second.
Move?
Okay, could you just repeat it? There was-
I move that we allocate $18,000 from the reserve fund for installation of 729 metal laminate fire alarm signs at Garden Villa buildings and allocate $140,000 from the reserve fund for the replacement of existing gutter systems at 10 Garden Villa buildings.
Very good. And it was seconded. All right. Is there any other discussion?
No.
One question. Where in the reserve fund is it being taken out of?
At the corner of the reserve fund.
Well,
Are you referring to? Go back.
the 18 and the 140, we're going to allocate it out. We're going to take all the money in the reserves. We're going to say we're going to take 18 out for this and 140 out for that.
Right.
Correct.
Which fund are we taking it out of?
So this would come, again, you have three, you have the replacement, the laundry, and the elevator. This would come from the larger replacement fund. So, and then it will be included as a program underneath one of these headers here that you see on screen.
It won't affect the assessments in any way?
Correct.
No.
Correct.
Of course. I think that's,
No, that wasn't my question. My question
wanna see
is,
which fund.
if you've got reserves and you've got 25 items in the reserves that we're funding all the line items, and this is not a line item there, then money's coming out of one of those 25 things to move 18 here and to move 140 there. Which reserve line item are we stealing money from?
So you're not stealing it's an additional expense that you're adding to.
This is a new
So-
line.
So if we were to add it under,
Reserve fund.
So then, by your comment that it's a new line, then that line is going to have a negative 18,000, and the next line is going to have a negative 140,000 to spend
Yes.
on these two things. Correct. How are we going to fund those, since now we're negative in those two line items?
Reserve.
I'm just asking the question.
yes.
Comes out of the replacement fund.
It's,
The reserve has millions of dollars in it. It's a savings account. So all you're doing is taking from that. You're saying, hey, I'm going to do it this year versus next year versus the year after that or the year after that. You're just saying, hey, I'm going to take it out this year because I think I need it.
So we can take, I should have, oh, it's on. You turned it on? Okay, so we can take money from one reserve item to pay the 18 and a different reserve item to pay the 140. So what happened to my thoughts about taking some money for the fire funding?
so this is a new program. These signs are new. You're not taking it, you're not reducing funding for epoxy lining to fund these. This is just an additional expenditure. So previously, I believe it was Director Moon who raised the question about there being $16 million being spent. Now it's going to be 16.2 in 2026.
But my point is that you have 16 million in the reserves, but all that 16 million is spoken for, according to the way reserves are supposed to be run.
no,
No.
no.
What do you mean, no?
No.
If I put money into reserves for the roof, that's reserve money for the roof. And I can't use that money because we're short on reserve funds for landscaping. It's the money in the reserves, line by line by line, is, and it's in the reserve study,
So-
is line by line, it's specific for that item. And you can't take money from line 3 and move it to line 11.
Okay, Jim? if
Yeah, I mean,
Jim has the answer, so that's.
Yeah, I see your point, except that the reserve study is a 30-year study. Perhaps the
Doesn't have a
first
disc.
2 or 3 or maybe even 5 years can be more detailed plan, but after that, it's all estimates. So I do get your point that you've got to take, rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, but you don't know whether it's Peter or Paul or just not robbing anybody at all because there's some changes in process in year 10. So my point is, I think we're trying to be too exact with $150,000 taking out of the reserve, which is a 30-year fund, which is we're contributing to every single year to make it adequate according to reserve standards. What's that, the 30%?
Yeah.
Okay, and so that's what we're doing. Very few many HOAs do not have adequate
have the money.
reserves. And we planned very well over the last few years. I mean, when I say since we've been in existence, actually. But so I'm not sure what it is you're making this an exact
What I'm
study.
saying is if I put money in the reserves for the roof, then it gets used for the roof.
But not
Gutter is
everything
part
in
of
the
the roof.
reserves is identified.
Gutter is part of the roof.
Well, okay, then I'm putting money in for asphalt for the roads. Okay, but now we're gonna pull out 18,000 from the asphalt money to do the gutters.
But not everything in the reserves is designated.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, so
What
it's
is it
because the savings
designated?
account doesn't have designated
They're
for every dollar.
undesignated dollars.
It's not dollar for
I
dollar.
thought that was called savings account.
if I may, so you contribute a certain dollar amount to your reserves on an annual basis,
Right.
right? So,
12,
and
13 million.
while from a budgetary perspective, we have them delineated based upon building structures, electrical, landscaping, so on and so forth. All that money is going into a pool that the board here is deciding how to spend that money. In 2 months from now, if the board comes through and says, I want to change how those contributions are. I want to, rather than spending $3.1 million on building structures, I only want to spend $2 million. The board has that authority as long as the board approves it. It's not, once you put that money into the roofs, that is untouchable for roofs. We contribute money to operating and reserves. To your point, that once you put money into those two funds, you shouldn't be bouncing back and forth. But the
Which
money
is
that,
what we're doing.
No. So operating and reserve. So, but once that money is in reserve, you can spend it how the board directs that money to be spent. So if you want to spend additional $160,000 on gutters, you have that authority to do so.
We
Jim.
need to discuss this further. I don't agree with that,
Okay.
based on my understanding of how things are supposed to work.
Jim?
No.
Yeah. Jim, did you have a comment? No.
No, I'm finished, yeah.
You were kind of waving back there. All right. Yes.
Howard, you are correct in your way, but when we funded to reserve fund, it's global reserve fund, not specific. Until we are discussing year 2026, so we make a specific replacement fund. Until that, it still become global. Okay, so in real, you are correct. Each reserve, we have to take it, but we don't take it until next year, following year.
Okay. Robert?
I understand all of this, but can we speak to the motion that's on the floor?
Call the
You had a
question.
But that's my question
No,
to
no.
the motion, where's the money coming from? And my
Reserves.
point is that even though we put 13 million into reserves,
Not designated.
and we're calling it a pool of money that we use however we see fit, but it's in the reserves, it's supposed to be treated as if we had 25 savings accounts. It's fund accounting, so that you're allocating fund for the roof and fund for that's how it's supposed to be, with using the reserve study as a guide.
Jim?
Each project is not a fund until it's been allocated in a given year.
Except we would not be putting in the 13 million if we didn't have this list of things that the reserve study said to put money in for.
And no,
And the
this is,
money is supposed to be allocated out to all the items. If there's 20 items here, it's supposed to be tracked.
It's a lovely
this-
thought, but there's no way to anticipate where the need is going to come from.
right.
And that's the
Can I call
problem.
the question?
Yes.
Because
And
we're
the
not
question
going to
was called
resolve
that.
R- right.
your concern.
Yeah. Call for the vote.
Move to call the question.
I call the question.
Okay, and, all right. Question's been called. All those in favor of this allocation, raise your hand. Opposed? Abstaining? Okay. It passes. And the discussion to be continued later, but I think that at some point should probably have a little deeper dive into what reserves are, how they're allocated, how they're there, if they are allocated, and not the.
I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying. In terms of the motion that we have, whether it comes from a line item, whether it comes from the pool, whether it comes from whatever, to me is not relevant at the moment for approving this.
His question say that, I'm not approving it because I don't know which line it's going to be.
I
I have a
understand.
right to take it from.
And
the
I
line.
understand that.
That's what.
No,
Okay,
And he has
that
a right to
passes.
say that.
Yeah, passes.
Are there any other questions related to this version? And since we will not be voting on the budget until our September meeting, what do we need to do between now and then? Did we give you any changes that were specific? And there was a lot of discussion, but I don't remember any specific changes, other than what we just voted on.
Correct. Yeah. Other than whether you just voted on, no.
Okay. And so, as it stands now, are we all with the understanding that what we will be looking at on September, I believe the 16th, is this budget?
No. The reason is that in MNC, we're going to discuss those, the epoxy lining and the copper lining. And if there are any changes, we're going to transfer that information to be updated on the business plan.
Reza,
Okay.
also include paving.
Well, to discuss those. If those going to change and we are not agree with the amount and, the board's going to change that number from 1.5 million and 1 million to different number, I don't know, whatever number, then we have to give you that so you can update that for the September.
When is the meeting?
MNC.
September 16th.
No, that's our board meeting.
No.
Board meeting is
it's the
tomorrow.
7th. I think
No,
MNC
the
is
board
a-
meeting we will be voting on is September the 16th.
Okay.
We are not voting tomorrow
No, it's
on this
prior.
budget.
So I think we may need a special.
When is the next MNC meeting when you will be making a decision?
if you-
So if I
May-
can comment,
may I
that it's,
offer-
it's not relevant.
Yes,
So-
that's the bottom line.
So ultimately, what I would ask to say is whatever we decide here will stay, because one of the reasons why we've struggled with the reserve study is we still are making a lot of changes. So my recommendation here would be hold the line on what you decide here today, and that's what will go into the business plan. But no different than any other reserve project, I understand that what's in the plan you feel is going to be spent. In 2 months from now, if the MNC as well as the board decide, I want to take that funding from $1.5 million to 1.2, whatever the dollar amount may be, staff recommendations be brought before the board, and we will take that funding down and we will drop it or increase it to whatever dollar amount you see fit. But I'm really asking you to hold the line here. That way I can finalize the reserve study this week and have it presented to you before it comes to the board.
I understand, I agree.
Okay? Because you were the.
I don't
There-
understand.
No, because
why
it
he
doesn't
has to.
impact, what you're
It has no
concerned with
impact.
is that if we change that, it's going to impact the assessment. It won't.
It won't.
Not, there will be
It will
no.
not.
Does not
It's
change
out
the
of
assessment.
reserve. We can control the reserve through the year even.
Which is why
Even
we
if you
have
approve
enough
it
funds
through
in the
year,
reserve.
You can say, I'm not going to spend this much money, or I can.
That's right.
But, so, it's not going to impact the assessment. That's why I agree.
Okay. And the MNC was the deciding. Is there any objection?
No,
Moving
I'd like
forward.
to see the impact on the PMPM.
There is no.
There is no impact.
That's what they've already told you.
Zero.
If we reduce MSC budget by $1 billion like last
We're
year,
not
you
doing,
will
they're
go
talking
down.
about
That's reserve.
That's
It's
reserve.
reserved.
reserve.
It's reserve, it's
It
not
doesn't
operation. You are not reducing operation.
Jesus.
You're reducing, you were talking about we are not going to spend money from the reserve. And you can do that through the year, not right now, because it has no impact on the per man per month cost. That's why I agree. Because you can change that 2 months from now, I said, I don't want to spend that much money. Exactly what we did last year on the.
On the pipeline.
On the pipelines.
Okay, because that's how it works.
Okay, I don't agree with it, but that's.
Okay.
fine.
Yeah. It will not impact the bottom line.
Okay. that's-
Regardless.
All right,
move this
with
along.
that,
Yeah, let's call this meeting off.
okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Any board members who feel the need to make a comment before we adjourn?
Okay.
Any staff who feel the need to make a comment before we adjourn? Then this meeting is adjourned.